Coming up on More Than Before.
It clicked for me right there. The fulfillment that I experienced helping him be better was so much sweeter than any fulfillment that I had from my own success. The first time where I really helped someone else have a light bulb go off in their mind and then see their performance increase because of it, that's multiplied in terms of the fulfillment that I experienced. Once you've tasted significance, success will never satisfy.
Hey everyone, what does it take to launch multiple best-selling books, lead one of the world's most trusted leadership brands, and still stay rooted in family and faith? Well, my guest today has done that. He is the Executive Vice President of Maxwell Leadership, in charge of publishing, content development, talent management, and also acquisition. He has helped launch 6 USA Today best-selling books, as well as a New York Times best-selling book. But beyond professional titles, he's a husband, a father, a leader who lives out that progress is better than perfection. He is a leader of leaders when it comes to humility and truly living out a life that is more than before. Jared Cagle, it is an honor to have you on, brother. How are you today?
I don't know. I need to go somewhere and put that on replay for the days where I'm struggling and really feeling down about myself. Nathan, you're the ultimate hype man, my friend. I don't know how to start from there, but I'm honored to be here. Super grateful that you've had me on, and can't wait to jump in together with this.
I love that. I've always thought about that. Wouldn't that be great just to hire someone that could just follow you around? I remember a long time ago, there was a comedian who talked about, I'd love to hire someone who would just narrate my entire life. And there he was picking up the mangoes. And as he looked over the mangoes, he saw the beautiful woman across from him and wondered, could they once live a life together in harmony? Wouldn't that be great just to have a hype man throughout your life?
That would be great. We need it. Some days we need it more than others, for sure.
Yes, definitely. So, well, I'm excited to dive into your story because you truly do have a rich background with a lot of different aspects, a lot of different areas, and you are very well rounded, I think, as a person, just from sports to academia to just people in general of connecting. And so I'm curious to start with where you grew up. You grew up in Gainesville, Georgia. What was life like being the oldest of 3 rowdy, crazy boys?
It was very competitive. It's a small town. There's, I don't know, 300,000 or 400,000 in Gainesville, and everybody kind of knows everybody for the most part. And we were very competitive in our home. My parents were both athletes and grew up high school sweethearts that came together and had a rich history as well, even in Gainesville. So the funny thing is, my kids are 9th generation Gainesville, Georgia. Which is pretty crazy. We moved to Atlanta in college, and then when I got married, we lived in Atlanta in the city, but then we ended up moving back home and had our kids here in Gainesville as well. So yeah, 9th generation, a lot of deep roots. Nowhere really to hide much when I was growing up, but it certainly formed me and shaped me for where I am today.
Yeah, definitely so. And we'll definitely get into the you weren't able to hide in a little bit here. So like, what was your temperament like as a child? Were you a good student? Were you a go-getter? Give us a little bit of a taste of what was Jared's personality like growing up?
Sure. I was a good student. I was a little bit of an underachiever through middle school and high school coming up, because I didn't want to, I was very concerned about what other people thought. So that's a big part of my story too. Just the hyper awareness of what's happening around you. And then the far too much focus on what other people think. So I didn't want to make the A+. I wanted to just kind of be up near the top, but not all the way at the top. Which in hindsight is ridiculous. But anyway, that's the way I was. And, the school for me was an opportunity to excel for sure. but it was always the learning that I was most interested in. I've been an avid learner since I can remember, and that those early years there were a few special teachers that helped shape that,
Mm.
especially in the way of writing, reading, just always looking to accumulate more knowledge. And so I go back to those years a lot for how that has inspired me and gotten me to where we are today.
Mm. As an avid learner when you were younger, what did you aspire to be? What was the dream that Jared wanted to achieve?
Actually, the dream early was to be an athlete. I wanted to play basketball my whole upbringing, and then I ended up kind of being a little bit better at golf, and so I got a scholarship to go play golf in college, and we had some good success through those years. And I was trying to actually be a professional golfer for a good part of my life, and I had a lot of friends sort of living out of the trunk of their car trying to make it work. They've got a family back home waiting on, it just wasn't really gonna work for as hard as it was to admit, I just wasn't good enough to really make it. And so had to make that decision to step away. But yeah, I mean, funny enough, I wanted to be in sports all the way through, even all the way through college.
Mm. Who are some of your big influences growing up? Like, who really poured into your life, and what were some of those major lessons that you still carry over to today?
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, my dad. I'm very, very fortunate and blessed to have two incredible parents. My dad was in the public eye with his job for the majority of my life. Since I was 6, he was elected into public office, and all the way through, even past college into marriage, he was still serving in as a political figure. And so he exposed me to much greater heights, much greater conversations. I was able to be in rooms that I really had no business being in, and getting to watch him and the way that he served people, the way that he cared for people, and the way that he really tried to
Mm.
lift the tide for all the boats to rise. That's the way that he lived life, and or still still lives life. No past tense. He's still with us. Praise God. Yeah, he was number one. He still is number one, and I count that as a great blessing. I mean, I have several others. I could point to coaches and teachers, as I mentioned. That one teacher sticks out. She probably doesn't even know it. But my 10th grade English teacher, Holly Wilson,
Mm.
just absolutely lifted my eyes to what could be as a writer.
Mm.
And even at the time, I kind of pushed against that. Just I don't know. I just pushed against it. But she always called out what I could be, and lifted my eyes to something greater, um, and just called out that potential. And so I look back on that one year as extremely catalytic for where I am today. And a lot of what I get to do is writing, it's editing, it's looking at an idea and a concept, and somehow being trusted to be the one to say, yeah, that's a good one, or no, that's a bad one, and we should change this, we should change that. And yeah, I go back to that 10th grade year a lot as inspiration for where I am.
Wow. I love, it's funny because as I hear you talking about your dad, there is an apparent love for just who he is and what he's taught you. And yet there is such a high standard, I think, that your dad set. Like, to just touch on some of the waves of his accolades, it's crazy because he's very impressive. He has a very impressive resume. He was a triathlete. He was very good. He was going
Yeah.
to play professional, or not professional football, but he was going to play college football until he injured himself. He was an entrepreneur. He had a tuxedo shop at one point. He started the Southern Heritage Bank. He was a founder of that. He became the lieutenant governor of Georgia, which is crazy. But not only that, he was also the youngest senator at 28 years old. So
Yeah.
to like to look at that, you had some high bars that you had to hit. And
Yeah.
so I'm curious, how did that translate in life? Having such a powerful figure, and I'm sure that he was a loving and encouraging guy, but when you see your dad as such an amazing superhero, what does that do for you in terms of, challenging you to reach maybe even an echelon beyond him, but maybe going, man, like, am I ever going to be able to do that? Because this guy, my dad is so impressive, like truly on paper. What does that do for you, growing up to challenge you or uh, maybe inspire you, maybe cause some like doubts? What does that do for you?
So two things I love before I answer the question. One is I love that you've done your research. I didn't give you any of that about my dad, so obviously you've done your due diligence. And number two, I'm really grateful that we're talking right now at 36 years old and not 8 years ago, 9 years ago, because I spent the majority of my life trying to outrun his shadow.
Mm,
The the vast majority of certainly my younger years, but then once I started kind of coming into my own and trying to have my own path, especially in college and after college, I wanted to be as far away as I possibly could from his shadow, and it really defined me. So if we would have been having this conversation 8 years ago, I would not have wanted you to say any of that. I wouldn't have even wanted, I'm like, I would have almost wanted to hide who I was. Actually, when I was interviewed the first time to be a part of Maxwell Leadership, I was walking through the office. Nobody there knew me. I'm walking through the office, and one of the guys, the guy who was interviewing me, walks by his desk, and he's got a picture with the governor of Georgia and my dad, lieutenant governor, next to him with him in the middle. And he's like, he's bragging about how he's met the governor and lieutenant governor as he's walking through. And I didn't say a word. Like, he has
mm,
no idea who I am. He has no idea. And so it wasn't until 2 years later when the guy came back around, he's like, are you kidding me? You let me talk about, like, I had no idea that that was your dad. You let me talk about, as if I had met some, incredible person. It's your dad the whole time. And I'm like, listen, I want I want my own path, right? I want
yeah.
my own. But here's what's faulty about that thinking, Nathan, and I'm pretty far off of your question, but maybe we can get back. Maybe you can wrangle me here, but I what's faulty about that thinking is we cannot forget where we come from, and we do stand on the shoulders of people. And if
Mm,
if we don't take that with gratitude, I think it was Chesterton who said it's not about life is all about gratitude. Like, are we gonna? It's a choice. Are we gonna take it for granted, or are we gonna take it with gratitude? And that's the biggest separator with individuals who really go the distance. We talk
mm,
about being successful. What does it look like to be successful for a long time? Not just burn quickly and then burn out just as quickly. I wanna do this for the long game. And when I look at the way that I saw my upbringing, and I really didn't take it with gratitude. And because of that, I didn't stand on the shoulders that I could have. I didn't take advantage of the opportunities that I have because I was trying to pave my own path. No one becomes successful, especially for long, by
mm,
themselves. No great leader, no great business leader, no great political leader, no great, there is no lone wolf when it comes to great leaders. And it took me a long time to realize that. But when I came around that and my heart really started to soften, the gratitude that I have for my dad and how he paved the way, I saw it as a shadow. Now I see it as a path.
mm,
He opened doors that I couldn't have gotten in before. John Maxwell talks about this a lot. He tells me directly, Jared, I can get you in these rooms. It's your responsibility to stay. I can't keep you in the room. You got to show the value that you have. You got to be who you are and confident in who you are. And that's what my dad did for me too. And it was, being in public office, especially, and he ran for governor and lost. And so there's stories we could talk about there too. But it at the state level, I grew up under a somewhat of a microscope with that. And those great expectations, the high bar, the high standard that you talk about certainly affected who I was and who I am.
Mm. I love what you say, and it reminds me of a quote I just heard recently. I can't even attribute it to who said it, but they said if you're standing on someone's shoulders and no one can hear what they're saying, lift their voice up.
Oh, ha, ha,
And I love that because it's such a beautiful thing that, there are people in our life that have made a tremendous impact that some people will never hear their voice. And as a leader who stands on the shoulders of others, it's our responsibility to speak out to the people whose shoulders we're standing on. In fact, when I first started out as a coach, I named my business Platform Leadership. The idea was that many people feel that they need to be lifted as the leader over everyone else. But truly leadership is the exact opposite. It's the inverted pyramid. It's the leader that carries the weight of all of their followers on their shoulders. And so when you see that, the picture I had was someone holding up a crowd with two arms. And that is truly what a leader does. And I think that's something that your dad has lived out throughout his entire life. And there's a humbleness that comes to that too. And I mean, there's so many lessons. You also have two younger competitive brothers that you mentioned earlier. And you actually, I'm curious, you had a moment in your college career playing golf for the Georgia Panthers. You and your brother played on the same team. In fact, you guys actually won the championship. I'm curious, what have you learned by competing with your brother versus competing against your brothers?
That's that's a great question, and it's harder for the oldest, I think, too, because it's you're supposed to be better, right? I was always supposed to be better. Funny enough, so when I finished playing, I actually coached for a couple of years, and so ended up getting to coach my younger brother too, Grant, and he got to a place where he really was better than what I ever was, and there was a point where it turned for me, and I remember being on the driving range. If you're familiar with golf, that's kind of where you practice, and we're on the driving range, and I just spent about 4 minutes and kind of gave him one idea and tweak to his swing, and he started just really hitting it right where he was looking, and went out that day and performed very well, ended up finishing second in that tournament, which was a very prestigious tournament. And it clicked for me right there that the fulfillment that I experienced helping him be better was so much sweeter than any fulfillment that I had from my own success. And I had to experience that before that light bulb could come on. I spent my whole life making it about my progress, my success, my excellence, but the first time where I really helped someone else have a light bulb go off in their mind and then see their performance increase because of it, I mean, that's multiplied in terms of the fulfillment that I experienced. John says it this way. He says that once you've tasted significance, success will never satisfy. And significance is all about others. Success is more about you, but significance is all about others. How are we lifting each other up? And so, yeah, it flipped that day, I would say, from competing against him to now with him and being that rising tide that lifts all boats.
That lesson of significance is so powerful. I remember being in Guatemala with John when he preached that for the first time. I think it was the first time that anyone in the room at least had heard that. 250 coaches from around the world, and him talking about significance before any of us had really tasted significance. And I think that we conceptually understood it. I think this will drive what your point is conceptually you understand it, but until you taste it, you don't get it. Until
Yeah.
you taste the significance, until and success is important. We've talked about that before on the podcast. It's important to have success, but significance is something that truly does outlast you. I'm curious. So you graduate from college. Where does your life go from there?
Yeah. Well, I quickly realized that I wasn't going to be able to make it professionally. So as I was trying to figure out what was next, I ended up getting my master's degree in sports administration because I wanted to be an athletic director at that point. So that was kind of my pivot. But I was making $25,000 a year in the athletic department at Georgia State, and we were living in Buckhead, which is one of the more expensive parts of Atlanta, and just got married. Loved where we were, loved the church that we were a part of, but just weren't making enough money to really sustain, what we were trying to do. Kids, wanted a family. And so I actually started looking for some side work and got connected with Maxwell Leadership at the time. And they had an opportunity for me to come on as a salesperson, just kind of temporary, a temp sales rep, making phone calls. And that very small yes, because I didn't have to leave what I was doing. It was kind of on the side. But that small yes opened up the door to so much more than I could imagine, because as soon as I got in the environment with Maxwell Leadership, I was exposed now to things that I didn't realize I needed, and people and opportunities that would certainly change the way that I looked at the rest of my life. And so anyway, about 5 months into that temporary position, they offered me a full-time job, and that was 2013, end of 2013, and I've been there in some capacity ever since.
Wow. We all have crucible moments in life, and I love the crucible moments because they're the hard moments where life hits and you have to make a decision. And that decision is going to determine who you're going to be, right? It's the furnace, it's the crucible of character. And we all have those. I'm curious, what were one or two of your large crucible moments in your life where you had to make a decision that was truly going to change or alter the trajectory of where you were going?
Yeah, I'll go personal on this one too. We were living in Buckhead, Atlanta. I love the city. I love the opportunity. There were several things about our life at that point that I wanted to build on, and my wife just couldn't get her heart peaceful about where we were. And so for several months we struggled through, what she's feeling this need to move back home. She's feeling this draw to, start a family and move back there. And I was on a totally different wavelength, and I'm trying to lead this family, but also, like, leading is not just getting your way. It's not being in charge. It's so much more than that. And so I'm learning all those lessons as well, and ended up moving back, not really sure why, and had to give up a lot of opportunities, and even walk away from a church that I really loved and wanted to continue to be a part of. And when we moved back home, it wasn't long after that we found out why she was feeling that draw and why we believed the Lord was leading us back, because her brother passed away tragically. And suddenly, and then 10 months later, her dad had a heart attack and died. And so within less than a year, their whole family and my whole family was shaken. Her brother was 26. Her dad was not even 60 at the time. And so we're in this season of, our life is not our own. Our life is but a vapor. God has a plan that's far beyond what I was seeing. Just this little, like, what can we be? What can we become? How can we make a difference? And he used that season to show me that, planting roots, having sustainable impact, and also taking every day very seriously, and having the urgency of the daily walk was, yeah. So he taught us that in that season. Moving back home was a very difficult decision for me, and but I know that it was for a reason. We needed those 2 years before to really lay down some roots. you have to, this is another quick lesson on that I learned is, um, it's the whole prepare before it's time thing, right? When opportunity comes, it's too late to prepare. They say drink before you're thirsty, right? If you can't hydrate, it's too late if you're chugging water when you're in the middle of a triathlon. And that I experienced that too. We had to lay down roots and plant those seeds for when we needed them later. And the value of community, the value of having somewhere in some group of people that have your back and can stand with you through difficult times. I would encourage anyone out there, don't wait to dig and plant those roots, but until you need them. Start today.
Your father-in-law, speaking of really great men, he was also a really incredible guy with high
Mhm.
value. What were some of the things that you learned from being around your father-in-law?
Oh man. What a great man. I preached his funeral, and that was a very hard thing for me. He really was a second father figure. I met my wife in the 7th grade, so I knew her family since we were very young. We dated off and on through high school, and one of the things I think that comes to mind for him above all the things is his generosity. He was an optometrist, had several different eye practices, and at the height he had 4 different locations, and so he was the guy who would go 15, 20 minutes longer with a patient because he wanted to make sure that he was giving them his best. He wanted to make
Mm,
sure he was giving everything that he could, and he was so generous with his time, so generous with his wisdom and his money, his home, his everything. He was a guy that would give you the shirt off his back for sure. But yeah, I would say I learned generosity from him in probably the more unique and creative ways.
mm,
He gave money, but he wasn't the typical like just give a whole bunch of money. He got creative with his giving,
yeah.
there was no limit to what he was willing to be generous with, and he taught me that generosity is not just about giving money. It's far deeper than that.
Wow. That is really powerful. Uh, so how did you get into the publishing world? Because it's funny because as you listen to the trajectory of where your life's going, there's seeds early on from your teachers pouring into you. Because I mean, I was not a great student, especially when it came to literature. Reading was not a strong piece. I always say that I was probably one of the few people that graduated from college without really reading any of my college books, which is probably why my grades were the way that they were. But what led you to getting into the publishing world to where you are right now?
So this is hysterical to me. So much of my life has just been defined by saying yes, and even when you don't know what's on the other side, it wouldn't be faith if we knew everything that was on the other side. And so it's those small yeses. One day, our marketing director at Maxwell left, our graphic designer left, our executive director left, all in a pretty short span of time over on the nonprofit side of our business, which is where
Mm.
I was at the time. And in that moment, it was like, okay, we've got this Mac computer where we design everything. Jared, you're kind of young. Maybe you can figure it out, right? So in about 3 or 4 weeks, I would say, I learned Adobe InDesign, Photoshop, Illustrator. I just taught myself all of these things on because we had an annual report that was due that had to be sent to the printer. I wrote all the copy for it. I designed everything for it. Just really said yes and went and figured it out. After that, they came to me and they said, "Hey, we got this Instagram page for John Maxwell. It's 140,000 followers. We never post. You're kind of young. Apparently, you can design and write a little bit, which we didn't know. What do you think about taking on this Instagram account?" I'm like, "Sure." So I start posting about once a week, maybe twice a week, and the following starts really increasing. Really, I'm not a social media guy at all, especially then, but I'm just saying yes and doing what I can and stewarding the voice. And one day, Mark Cole, our CEO, came to me or he actually came to my boss and said, "Hey, so I'm seeing this Instagram stuff. Like, what, who's people are telling me that they're loving John Maxwell's Instagram. What is that? Who's doing it? And so Chad Johnson, my boss at the time, he says, yes, Jared. Yeah, he's been doing that for about a year now. And nobody knew it, right? Nobody. And so Mark had a meeting with me. He's like, I had no idea you could write. I had no idea you had aspirations to write. I said, yeah, no kidding, because everybody around here wants to write. Everybody around here wants to be close to John. That's what we do here. We write, we speak. I'm not going to be that guy. I'm not going to be that guy. And so what's so interesting to me, he started asking me questions about how I was able to write in the voice of John Maxwell, how I was able to steward his voice so well. And he was actually reading the captions that I was writing. And so, my simple answer was, I've been listening and reading and watching everything I possibly can about John. I take this very seriously. Maybe not everybody wants, or not everybody knows about Instagram, but I've been given an opportunity to steward a hero's voice. I take that very seriously. And what's so funny to me is I go back to that, like that was a turning point for my career. And I had no idea when I said yes to Instagram, I had no idea that was going to be a turning point in my career. And they were going to look at me and say, actually, he can write. And eventually John Maxwell was going to bring me into his writing team and ask me to help critique him on his writing and his books. And if I don't critique him hard enough, he gets really frustrated with me and tells me I'm not going to have a place in the room if I don't use my voice anymore. I'm like, you're John Maxwell. Need I remind you, you're 96 books in and 12 of them have sold over 1 million copies. You're John Maxwell. Do you know who I am? No, that's the point. No. So, but it's a wild ride. And it started with just a really simple yes.
Well, it's such a testament of who you are to be surrounded by the people that you're around, because you're around a lot of great leaders. Don't get me wrong. Everyone in the Maxwell leadership organization, there are a lot of great leaders, but there are two leaders within that organization that define the culture and the feel of the organization. And those two leaders, John Maxwell and Mark Cole, who are both massive servant leaders. And it's by no accident that they've placed Jared in the position, because Jared, you are truly a huge servant leader, because one of the defining pieces of a servant leader is someone who is willing to learn, someone who's willing to swallow pride and say, you know what, I don't know this. Let me go figure it out. Let me go find the answer. I've heard that story so many times of John telling his assistant, when she said, hey, go get me connected to this person, go get their number. I don't know it. And then him going out and spending half the day going and find the number. That you are surrounded by servant leaders, but not only that, these servant leaders are some of the most amazing people you could possibly be around. In fact, you have spent a lot of time with amazing leaders. Like, I'm not going to go into naming every single person that you've had conversations with, but when you look at the fact that you've spent a lot of time with Tim Elmore going through books, on your podcast of helping people learn how to write a book and what are the stages that you should go through and think about, like you truly do get surrounded by amazing people. I'm curious though, you actually have gotten to spend some time with people who have Grammy nominated songs, people that write amazing music. And because you're in the world of publishing, I'm curious, where does the crossover happen with writing an amazing song that's going to be a hit and being able to write a book that is going to stand the test of time? Where's the crossover between those two genres of book and music?
Let's have some fun right here, Nathan. That's a great question. So the beautiful thing about music is you only have so long. Songwriting, you only have a few minutes. A book, you got a lot longer. But here's the tricky thing with a book. We think we've got a lot longer when really we got about the same amount of time to grab somebody's attention. And people's attention is shrinking and shrinking and shrinking the more we dig into technology and the days that we're in. John always says, hey, at the end of every page, I ask myself the question, will the reader turn the page? And if John Maxwell is asking that after every single page, right? Every single page, what's going to make the reader want to turn the page? And so when you're writing a song, I think there's so much crossover there. You only have so much time with a song, so you have to get really focused and really clear and really you got to know your audience and know how to grab their attention. It's not much different with a book. You only have so much time to grab and keep their attention, and you have more time to unpack it, but you can't fool yourself into believing that you're going to have their attention all the way through the book if you don't really get focused on how to connect with them. At the end of the day, connecting is the most important principle for any form of communication, whether we're communicating through a song, through a book, from the stage, on a podcast, connecting. And if you're going to connect, you have to know more about the other person that you're trying to connect with, more about your audience. You have to spend more time on them than you do on you. You want to be more interested in them than you are trying to make them think that you're interesting. These are all things you got to think about when you're communicating. And so all that being said, I see a song as a communication vehicle. It's a smaller one. It's packaged differently. It's universal in language, which is beautiful. Like, so it travels, really beyond what a book could. But there's so much crossover because it's a communication vehicle as well. What message do we want to convey? What value can we add to the listener? Whether it's a song, whether it's a keynote, whether it's a podcast, whether it's a book, it's the same endeavor. We're trying to connect with the person so that they can then go take that value they've received and multiply it to the people around them.
You are so passionate about so many different subjects, which I think it really does lend to your ability to connect and even your ability to work with people from very different backgrounds, varying different backgrounds of industry and focal point. But one of the things I really love about you, and we're on the same page with this, you're a coffee file. You love coffee. You're someone who's passionate about coffee, and I like a guy passionate about coffee. There's something about geeking out over coffee and how you brew it and how you roast it. And you're one of those guys. And so I want to ask you this question because one of our good friends that we've already mentioned on this podcast so far today is Mark Cole. He said that everyone deserves to be led well. Everyone deserves a good leader. I've actually, one of the mantras of the coffee businesses that you co-own, you both say that every single person should have access to great coffee. Why is that important, that every person have access to a good cup of coffee?
Well, so for me, I do love coffee. I love the taste of coffee. I love how it makes me feel. I love I love how it makes my mind work better. Right? There's good things, but those are side effects. What I really love about it is how it's still one of the more relational devices that we have in our culture. And it's one of the only ones where we can say, hey, you want to go grab a cup of coffee? And most people find that as disarming. Most people find that as an opportunity to connect and an opportunity to get to know one another and an opportunity to sit down. And in the hustle of Western American society, right? One of the things we've lost, I think, Nathan, the other parts of the world and other cultures, they sit down and have meals for hours. Like, they don't rush away from the table. In America, we are racing to see who can have lunch the fastest so that we can get back to work, right? But there's something about coffee where it's like, "Hey, can we go grab a cup of coffee?" We might sit down for 20, 30 minutes. We might sit down for an hour. We might sit down for 90 minutes. I haven't sat down for 90 minutes in a long time, if I must confess. But there's something disarming about coffee, right? So that's really what I love, and it's kind of a fun line. Hey, everybody deserves a good cup of coffee. One of the things we're trying to do with our coffee roastery is make it affordable, make it accessible, make it to where it can be brewed in multiple types of ways. So it's not specific to, some specialty grinds. You kind of have to do it in a pour over, or you kind of have to do it in espresso to really get what you want. We're trying to be a little more accessible, a little more well-rounded, because we want our brand to be synonymous with that, and we want people to be able to sit down and be together as the most important part.
I love that. You are such a driver. You like, you're an achiever. You see something and you go after it. And I've talked about this a couple times, and I'm curious on your take on this. As an achiever, because I'm one of those too. It's really easy to forget the people closest to us. It's really easy to get so focused on a goal, you run after it. You stay up late to do your work, to make sure that you're doing your best with all excellence. And when you stay up late, you don't go to bed with your wife, and your relationship suffers over time. You have been extremely intentional to protect your marriage. That's why you've been married for over 11 years now. I'm curious, what have been some of the monumental decisions that you've made to make sure that you've protected your family while also pursuing things that are great?
Yeah. Well, Mark Cole's ears are ringing this morning, I'm sure, because I'm about to mention him again. We've mentioned him a few different times, but
We'll
it's for
edit
good
out.
reason.
We'll take his name out for every time we
Yeah.
said it. Or we'll pay him. I don't know. One of the two.
Yeah, royalties. But for good reason, we're mentioning him. He's taught me how to be present with your family, even when you're not with them. And when you are with them, they're the most important thing that's in front of you, right? So those two aspects, like, you could be across the world. He could be across the world traveling and impacting leaders in a different country, and still present with his family. I've seen him drop things in order to take a phone call with them. My dad's another good example of this. I do not remember a time where I called my dad when he was in the height of his career politically, and he didn't pick up the phone. I cannot remember. I legitimately, sometimes it was, "Hey, are you good? Can I call you right back?" But he always picked up the phone. And that's a huge challenge for me. I mean, my kids are still young, so they're not calling me, but I think about that all the time. How can we be present even when we're not with them? That's number one. Same with Kaylin. How can I be present even when I'm not with them? I'm out here learning and growing on what feels like one of those moving sidewalks. Like, it's exponential growth right now for me, from a professional standpoint and a personal standpoint, certainly a leadership standpoint. She's not with me in those endeavors. She's not with me in these conferences and these rooms and these boardrooms, and she's not with me in that. But how can I keep her present? How can I be present with her as I grow, even when she's not with me in that? That looks like explaining in great detail all that I've been a part of, talking with her through it, helping her see the impact that we're having, helping my kids see the impact. "Dad, you're going to Arizona again. You just went to Florida last week. Why are you going?" "Well, babe, I'm going to meet with these people that are doing these things, and we're able to make this impact together." And my 10-year-old is saying, "Wow, we get to do," "Yeah, and you are helping me do that right now, Everett. You're a part of that story." And so it's this principle of how can we be present even when we're not with them, but then also when we are with them, making the most of those times. I had a mentor tell me last year, and it really impacted me. He said he's got a hat in his truck, and so when he takes his kids to practice, he puts on that hat, and nobody knows it except for him, but that hat is synonymous for it's his dad hat. You know, I'm putting this hat on when it's time to be dad. And when I put that hat on, symbolically, I'm saying to myself, put the work aside, put the achieving aside. It's time to be dad. And that really impacted me as well. I think they notice, the kids and certainly our spouses, they notice when we're with them and we're not present. And it's very important that we give them our best when we're with them.
It's so powerful. You have said so many things on the podcast. Like it's by no surprise to me that there is just wisdom that pours out of your mouth, not because there's something specifically special about Jared. Yes, you are a special guy, but it's because of the people that you've surrounded yourself with. It's the people that you've intentionally placed yourself at their feet, and you've allowed them to pour into you. And that's one of the things I really love about you, is that you truly are a learner. You're a passionate learner who wants to not just learn for self, but you want to learn because you want to help other people. And it truly is an admirable thing that I think a lot of people could really come to understand and live out in their day-to-day life. Jared, it's been so great having you on the podcast. I do have one more question for you, but before I ask it, all of you guys listening right now, go and subscribe to the Maxwell Leadership Podcast if you haven't done so already. It truly is a great podcast to listen to. It's going to sharpen you, whether you are a leader of children or whether you're a leader of large organizations. It is a podcast that is it's a go-to. You got to go get it. Second of all, I want you to go grab a bag of specialty coffee from Craftsman Coffee Company. I'm looking at my order right now. It's the Columbia and the Trusty Dusty. I like the fruity flavor of coffee, and so I'm looking forward to placing my order and getting my first cup of coffee here, because I got to have at least, I don't know, maybe I'm an addict. Maybe I need to go get some help for this. But and lastly, I truly want you to go check out some of the best-selling books that Maxwell Leadership is publishing right now with Jared's team. You got some truly amazing books. Chris Robinson just had his book come out. You guys heard me talk about it with him, From Drift to Drive. Ryan Leake's book on how to work with complicated people, which, by the way, you and I both work with complicated people, so you got to get the book. And we're not going to talk about the book, because if you want the information, you got to go get the book. So, with all those things in mind, subscribe to the podcast, get a cup of coffee, and go check out some really good reading that's going to fill your life. Jared, you've spoken about how people don't write books because they get stuck in perfection rather than living in progress. Yeah. What does progress over perfection look like in your life right now?
Whew. This is one of the core lessons that I'm always learning, and one of the more difficult for me, always has been. I like to be ready before I start. I like to come and show up in the room and be impressive, and I think people can relate to that. For me, progress looks like doing something consistently every single day, even if it's smaller than you think you should be doing. But don't let the smallness of that stop you from doing something, because a little bit of something over a long time is going to compound. And I tell people all the time, like, just put a word. If you're writing a book, put a word count on yourself. Like, and maybe it's small, maybe it's 100 words. Just write 100 words today, and do that for 5 days this week. And then do that for 10 days this month. And now we have 5,000 words, and that's a really long chapter. And you need 10 of those chapters to make a book. Like, we can do that, right? We can do 10 days a month at 100 words a day for 5 days a week, right? Like, but when you do a little bit, don't let the bigness of the goal stop you from doing a little bit today. That's what progress looks like. And the other thing that I'll say on that, as it relates to perfection, especially, John teaches me this better than anyone. If we don't put the idea on the wall, if we don't put it on the table, if we don't get it out into the world, we can't make it better. We can't
Mhm.
improve it. No idea is great, certainly not perfect the first time. If you keep it in here and you don't let it out, you miss out on the opportunity to really make it great, and letting other people see it, letting other people speak into it, letting other people hold you accountable to what you're trying to achieve. Most of the time, that's the difference in really making something great. And so,
Mm.
yeah, progress over perfection, big lesson. I got to preach to myself every day, Nathan.
I love that. And, it reminds me of the quote that the richest place in the world is the graveyard where people have gone to rest, and they've kept their ideas and their thoughts inside of them. And what you're talking about is so powerful that each and every one of us has a story, whether you get that out in the form of writing or whether you get that out in the form of like a podcast of coming on the show like
Yeah.
this and
Yeah.
telling your story so that people can hear it, so people can take the lessons that you've learned and they can apply them to your life. It really is important to get those ideas separate from yourself, just like you're saying, just like John has taught us.
Yeah.
I want to ask you one more question here because I think this is powerful. And I love that you talk about publishing a book. I love that you talk about writing 100 words a day, 5 days a week. And you can get a really good book out of that. Obviously, there's editing and there's improvement that
Sure,
comes
sure. Yeah.
along. But Jared, I'm curious if you were to write and publish a book tomorrow that your kids would one day read, what would the narrative arc and substance of that book be that you'd be communicating to Everett, Mick, and Rory?
Oh, don't do it to me, Nathan. Don't do it to me.
Which,
I'm
by the way, for those of you listening, I'm laughing at this question because Jared has been messaging me for the past month, 2 months. Hey Nathan, if you could write a book, what would that book be about? What are you passionate about? I finally messaged him back this a couple days ago, and I said, "Well, I'm not ignoring you. I promise you. I'm just preparing. I'm preparing for time with you. I'm preparing for time with other guests. We're gonna talk about it. Don't worry about it." And he was like, "Yeah, I completely understand that." And what's the last thing that he writes in his message to me? "So if there was an idea or a concept that you wanted to share." So it's funny because with our time, I wasn't going to originally ask the question, but as I was sitting here and as you so wonderfully landed the plane on this, what is the book? What is the book with that
Yeah.
overlying arc?
Yeah, and that's exactly why I said don't do it to me, because you got to take your own medicine every once in a while. I'm helping, literally. It's astounding to me, but I'm in the business of helping hundreds of people do the very thing that you just asked me to do. And all of my time is spent trying to help them get their book out. And there's gonna come a day, God willing, that I help myself get one out for the glory of God. I if I was writing one, especially in light of my kids and what I would want them to know and the next generation, I am very passionate about the next generation and helping bring the potential out of them and into light and helping them believe in themselves. I think I would go the route of hindsight. For me, the lessons that I wish I would have known, it's kind of like letters to a young leader, but it's letters to myself when I was 20.
Mm.
The things I wish I knew when I was just starting out as a leader. The things I wish I knew when I didn't even know that I was a leader. And the hindsight of that is like I've walked through it. I've learned some tough lessons. It's not been pretty every time. It's a lot easier to tell the highlights like we have today. But if there's any way that I could move my kids and future generations of leaders to the front of the line and give them a little bit of wisdom, I think that's what you're doing with this, Nathan. I think your heart clearly is to give wisdom, so that the people that are listening can have a little bit more of a jump start and
Mm.
get a little bit further ahead. My heart is always to take the people around me on my team or that I'm pouring into to a higher level than I'm at, and then a higher level than I ever could be at. It's a rising tide type of mentality to where we can lift each other. And I don't want to be the high. If I'm the highest in my world, then my legacy is very small.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think I would go that route and try to get specific on some of the lessons that I wish I would have known when I was just getting started.
I love that. The title that comes to mind is "Leading Forward from Past Wisdom," which is so beautiful because so many of us we gain wisdom over time, but we forget that we need to share it with other people. And I know that you're passionate about that. I know that you speak with youth and encourage them to have conversations, to ask questions, and you pour into their lives. Jared, thank you so much for sharing your story, the lessons that have shaped you over your life. I know that so many of us, myself including, we're listening and we're leaving today with practical wisdom that we can put into action. For all of you tuning in, don't just be inspired by Jared's words. This is not a podcast to inspire. This is a podcast that we want to encourage you to take a step to choose progress over perfection. Until next time, remember to be more, see more, and experience more than before.